Mohamed is a GIS specialist. He holds a master's in geographic information systems technology from U of A. And he has a bachelor's in surveying engineering from the University of Khartoum. Mohamed's research is focused on using GIS technologies like GIS to understand violence presence, promote sustainable peace, and citizen engagement. And so for each presentation, we have about 18 minutes. So if you guys have questions, please put them into the chat. Go ahead,
everyone. Hi, everyone. Glad to be back at EGIC. In July 2011, the longest civil war in the African history has ended by dividing one nation into two countries. That country was my home, Sudan. In a different continent, Latin America, after 50 years of civil war, the country in 2016 came to peace agreement, put a break on a 50 years of political violence. My work today on my presentation is all about how can we use technology to solve real-world problems. In this case, we are bringing two technologies together, natural language processing and GIS technology, to help policy community, academics, peace workers to understand political violence in a civil war setting. So we are using GIS and technology to understand the dynamic of the civil war.
Mohamed, your screen's not sharing anymore.
My, is it not sharing?
It's coming back now.
Mad, we are trying to build a peace. The context of the GIS. The Colombian Civil War started in 1960. Actors has emerged, many actors has disappeared, many actors has transformed. But there was always a problem. There was no systemic quantitative analysis to study sometime. This is a part of a project that was developed of analysis. So we get the look at it and see if to the program, and we are gonna get geolocation of 40,000 report of what happened, where it happened, and who did it. And this is how was with after geolocation reference. We had 2017, and this data shows the violence territorial GIS component. We use GIS mainly in happens and where it happened, and this are going up and what actors are going down, and predicting trend. And here actors are emerging and urgent. As we look here, this is the technological component. Reference data. That creation. Then
Mohamed, this is Jenna Levier. We can't. Sorry. Wow, the connection is really terrible. We can't hear you very well. I think we need to turn off the video and maybe have you call in if you can. I don't know if that will help. I really apologize, everyone. Mohamed, sometimes the audio through the computer is very, very difficult. It's not very stable. So we were unable to hear about 40% of what you were telling us.
That's a really big portion of my presentation.
I know, we can hear you better now.
Now you can hear me better? Okay, yep. I'm going to go really quick over. So the project is mainly about bringing two technologies together, the GIS and the natural language processing, to help us to help policymakers, academics, and peace workers to gain more understanding about political violence in a civil war setting. In this case, we're studying the Colombian Civil War. It took 50 years. After 50 years of political violence, in 2016, they had a peace agreement. Over these 50 years, some actors have emerged, some actors have transformed, some of them have disappeared. So we're trying to understand the dynamics behind that from quantitative analysis. We use the natural language processing. We have people who look at the news reports, and we looked over more than 40,000 reports from 1988 to 2017. And from that, we generated a geolocation database. This georeference data shows what happened, where it happened, and who did it. Then we use the GIS for three things: visualizing data, creating the maps and the visualizations, and doing the analysis, and then discovering patterns, what actors have emerged, what actors have transformed. and then to predict trend. And here we develop an early warning system to see what areas that need intervention, if it's emergent, and what actors that are emerging. Here is the technological component, the natural language processing. We do the georeferencing. The ArcGIS component, we see the ArcGIS desktop did the heavy lifting from analysis, map creation. The ArcGIS online is the host. ArcGIS for developer, for manipulating the base layers, and we're creating a web application, time sensitive. So the project output is a web application. If you want to see how the political violence, the civil war, move across space and over time, if you want to get more information, you can check the website. If you want to get a deep dive, the publications. If you are feeling adventurous, you want to try the analysis by yourself, you can get the database. And here, I will jump to this is a website where you can, oh, 1 second. This is the website where you can find the information about the project, colombiaarmedactor.org. We have everything, the information, and you can find there. Just did a small part within the project. There is a lot of people who did a great job behind it. Here, as a International Cartographic Association, you can find the publication. And here we can see the web applications. The web application shows us the dynamics. It's like a visualization for the data. It's interactive. So if we zoomed in, it's gonna re-render for us the data, the maps up to municipality level. It's gonna regenerate to see how it's changed on the municipality level. If we zoom out, we will notice that this part of Colombia, there is no incidence. But if we change the imagery, we will see this part is mountains and swamps. That's most of the population and the cities are in the east side, on the west side of Colombia. You can also choose the actors. It's like if you want to see a certain actor, the Elaine, or the most famous is the FARC. We can see that. And also we have a widget to see how it is developed across time. You will see in the early 19th, there wasn't much violence. When we are going to the second half of the 19th, dots start showing up. This is more accidents, more incidents. We see the incidents. We see how they change. Let's look for example. Let's zoom in here. This is kind of like the whole project in a nutshell. Like we are trying to use the GIS to help academic, policy worker, peace worker to understand the dynamic of civil war. It is something that I'm motivated that my home country itself was divided after more than the longest civil war in the African history. My country have divided into two states, Sudan and South Sudan. So I'm glad to be part of this project, and that is going to be all for now. Thank you very much for listening.
That was wonderful, Mohamed.
We did have one question for you.
Yes, absolutely.
So they're asking, are the interactive heat maps, are they based upon individual incident points over the entire time period?
I didn't understand that. Can you ask the question again?
Okay, sorry, I have to mute you because I get feedback whenever I don't have you, so I'm not sure if you, hopefully everybody else can hear me okay, but I'm going to unmute you as soon as I ask the question. They're asking, do the interactive heat maps, is it based on individual incident points, and is it over the entire time period? The question's also in the chat if you wanted to look at it.
Okay, so the incidents are collected daily. So as a point data, each point refers to one event. For example, in 2005, there was more than 3,000 violence incidents. And we can sort them by day, by months, but each point, it is one incident.
Okay, great. I think that answers the question. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. You got some comments there in the chat field. You want to check that out. And thank you everybody for having patience with us with the audio stuff. And so hopefully I'm coming in clear okay now. Can you guys hear me okay? Someone put a couple chat in there if it sounds all right. Chat.
You sound great, Jamie.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, so next up, we have Aparna. I'm going to make you a presenter. You can start sharing. Okay. I'm going to unmute you. You want to do a sound check real quick? Say hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Good. Okay. So let me introduce everybody for you. Introduce you to everybody. I mean.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So you want to? Am I going to mispronounce your name? Aparna Thatte. Is that right?
It's Aparna Thatte.
Thatte. Okay.
Yes.
Aparna Thatte she's a planner analyst with Mesa Public Schools in Arizona. Her primary job function is to project student enrollment for the next school year and beyond. Future student enrollment depends on current enrollment trends and other student demographics. So she uses GIS to locate the students based on the school district and school boundaries, and then to spatially analyze the student demographics. She also makes maps as requested by schools and departments, such as the transportation department. And she gets to support the local community through her work. She also enjoys creativity that her job entails through making the maps and writing reports. So I'm going to turn it over to Aparna to give us her presentation.
Thank you, Jamie, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So why study impact of new housing? My job at Mesa Public Schools, the main work is to project enrollment for the next year. So I ask questions like, what is the enrollment going to be like next year? And what is the enrollment going to be like in 5 years? So when there's new students coming in from new housing, and that is the past trend, that whenever there's new housing, there's new students, you need to figure in these additional students into the enrollment. There's other reasons to study the impact of new housing. City of Mesa and development or developers, housing developers are also interested in this information. So why look at future enrollment? One is to get an idea of funding. Since school districts are funded by student, it's important to know how many students are coming in next year. It also helps to make decisions like how many teachers to hire, how much other staff to hire, how many textbooks to buy, or how many supplies to buy to make school lunches, or art supplies, or library supplies. So the next 3 slides are going to be about Mesa Public Schools to give you a little bit of background on the school district. It's a unified school district. That means there's elementary, junior high, and high schools. So elementary runs K through 6, junior high runs 7 through 8, and high school runs 9 through 12. And the boundaries of elementary, junior, and high schools overlap, but they don't always mean the same thing. So it's important to look at new students for each school. If you look at the boundaries of Mesa Public Schools, it runs from 101 right up to Meridian Road, which is the edge of Maricopa County. And north-south, it runs Chaparral Road to Baseline Road and up to Warner Road, with a part of Chandler in it. There's 51 elementary schools, 9 junior highs, and 6 high schools within Mesa Public Schools. Now, these are just the boundary schools, and the analysis I'm going to describe is specific to boundary schools. There's 18 other schools, including preschool and programs like Montessori, but they are not part of this analysis. The demographics vary for each school. So again, it's very important to know the student numbers, the estimates for each school. When City of Mesa, the developers ask the question, what is the impact to schools? They are looking first to identify which schools will be impacted and then how much. So these are the jurisdictions within Mesa Public Schools. There's obviously a big part of City of Mesa, Chandler, Tempe, Apache Junction. There's like a tiny portion, but it has houses in it. Gilbert, there's another tiny portion with no residential areas. And then there's Maricopa County Islands, and some portion of Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian community is also within boundaries. So the assumptions for this analysis are past trends reflect future trends, and in the past, new builds have resulted in new students. So I'm going to start with an example of Dobson High School boundaries. So if I were to do this analysis for Dobson, I would only consider students grade 9 through 12 because it's a high school. If it was a junior high, I would consider 7 through 8. And if I was looking at an elementary school, I would only consider students K through 6. So when the boundaries overlap, some boundaries do overlap like completely within, but then you see Carson or Keno, a small parts of them overlap with Dobson, but not the whole thing. The same happens with elementary schools, Roosevelt, which I will use as an example later on. Again, only partial boundaries correspond, sort of. Webster, Lowell, same thing. So if you look at the zoning for Dobson, this is what it looks like. There's all different types of zoning. City descriptions and county descriptions for zoning vary slightly. If I'm doing the analysis for City of Mesa, then I will look only at city zoning, but I do ask for county data because sometimes I might have to look at other types of zoning within the county. Mesa Public Schools is completely within Maricopa County, so I usually look at Maricopa County descriptions or City of Mesa descriptions. So to show zoning, here's Roosevelt Elementary, and the residential zoning is R. So RM or R6 would be examples. There's usually single family and multifamily. So RM would be a multifamily and RS would be single family. Usually up till now, based on past trends, single family homes result in more students. However, in the future that can change. Sometimes you see new types of zoning, so you don't really have past trends, but you have to identify comparable types of zoning for that. So to estimate number of students, first I get student addresses, home addresses from Mesa Public School student database. Now this is private information, but I use it for this analysis. I cannot share this outside. Then I geocode the students, correct as needed, rematch, and so on. And I basically am looking for counts. So counts of students by zoning and school, and counts of all residential addresses by zoning and school. This gives me a density ratio, which is actual students divided by total residential addresses. This is going to be a different number for each school boundary and zone. Again, address information, student address information is private. I cannot share it with the public. So I have chosen a not current students or not current ad, but an older example to show. So if you look at Roosevelt Elementary boundaries, on the left is all addresses. This is what it looks like, all addresses. If you just look at student addresses, you'll see them in the residential areas as identified by the R zonings before, and they're far fewer when you compare them to all addresses. So to look at density ratio, I look at first a school. So Bush Elementary is another example of an elementary school. Then city zoning. So RS35 city zoning is single family houses with 35,000 square foot lots. Since it's an elementary, I'm only looking at student count, which is 100, and residential addresses, just 277. So I get a density ratio of 0.36. Now, when I get the information for the proposed development from City of Mesa, it usually has the number of units in the new development. So when you multiply this number of units by this density ratio, you can estimate future students. So here's an example of an estimate of future students. So for Hermosa Vista, with the RS15 zoning, which is 15,000 square foot lots, density ratio would be 0.72 for Hermosa Vista, multiplied by the new development number of units, which is 119. So you get an approximation of 86 students. Hermosa Vista capacity at the time was 1,000 plus students, and enrollment is 765. So Hermosa Vista does have the capacity to accommodate these students. I think, oh yeah, so I was going to speak briefly about the capacity of schools. I don't necessarily use GIS for this, and there's several ways to calculate capacity. You can calculate it on square footage, but I usually look at the number of classrooms in use. We have that information, and then about 28 students per classroom, and that's how I calculate capacity. Based on what impact the pandemic has, class sizes might change, and these estimations themselves for capacity might change in the future. So this is what a resulting picture looks like, which then we might share with City of Mesa. So it's a proposed development with 119 single-family homes with RS-15 zoning. All the schools are identified at all the different levels. The number of students are identified that might result from this development, and is there a capacity to serve. So the use of GIS within this analysis was the district boundary to find extents of zoning, jurisdiction boundaries to find relevant zoning, both at the city and county level, school boundaries, elementary, junior, and high school boundaries to calculate density ratios, which are calculated again by residential and student addresses. The student addresses have to be geocoded. And then zoning at the city and county level for all jurisdictions. For data sources, City of Mesa has an open data portal for zoning, and then I also request data from the Maricopa County assessor for zoning. For school shape files, I have that data. For school district boundaries, I have that information already. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this point.
Great, Aparna. Let's see. There was a question there are a couple questions coming in here. There was one earlier. It says, what is a boundary school? Did you speak about boundary schools?
Okay, so a boundary school is an attendance area that's sort of already pre-decided. So if there is a student that lives within boundaries of Dobson High School, which I showed as an example, and if they are a 9 through 12 student, then the student has to accommodate them. This is not true for charter schools or any of the other programs I talked about within Mesa Public Schools, where parent can make a choice to go there. They can also make a choice to go out of boundary, which is called open enrollment. But the boundary school has to accommodate the student if they live within boundaries, with very, very few exceptions. Does that answer the question?
Okay. I think so. Oh, who asked that one? Yating, did that answer your question? Type in there if it did. Yes, she said yes. Yating said yes. Okay, so Brian Bond asks, have you seen public school enrollment drop a lot in the past few years with more charter schools popping up? And are charter schools taken into account for your analysis?
So public school enrollment has been impacted for charters by charters for quite some time. It's not recent. I think a bigger impact, at least for Mesa and because of its demographics, is it's mostly built out. There is no new development. So that makes a bigger difference. I think the percentage of students who choose charters have already gone to charters, and then Mesa Public Schools also has charter schools within Mesa Public Schools. So some of them also opt for those schools.
Okay, great. Marty asks, how do you account for neighborhood populations aging? Do you redraw boundaries and propose those to the city, or is it a political decision?
It's based, it's like usually school decision makers, like in Mesa, they're called the superintendency. If a school has really low enrollment, they keep an eye on that. They have different ways of mitigating that by introducing special programs and so on. But if something simply isn't working, at some point they have to consider changing boundaries. But it's a process. So there's a committee which looks at, and first the board has to approve it. Then it goes to a planning and boundary design advisory committee, at least in Mesa. And then they hold public hearings. So it's a process to change boundaries, and it's not really easy.
Okay, great. And Troy, just to make sure that you did say that she did answer your question, correct? Can you just put yes in there? Want to make sure. I think you answered his question previously. Yes, you did. Okay. We have a few more minutes. If anybody has any other questions, or we can whatever. Looking. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's anything else in there. Thank you so much. That was very important. Oh, actually, I had a question. I typed it in here.
Okay.
Do you use a lot of Excel, or do you use a lot of Excel for doing some of your stuff, or do you use something like R or some other programming thing?
For this, I used ArcMap because that's what I have now. I didn't really focus so much on the technology because as the technology changes, I will probably change my process along with it. But I don't use Excel as much. I have SQL Server with ArcGIS, basically.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think that was it. I didn't know you had it down here. We answered all the questions. Well, thank you very much. That was really great, and appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to thank you. All right. So next up, we have Shiloh Johnson and Steve Hussaik. I'm probably brutalized your name, Steve. I'm so sorry. And as I understand it, Steve, you're going to be doing the presentation. Is that correct? Wait, sorry. I had to unmute you, Shiloh. Whoa, that was bad.
Is this better?
Maybe you should, can you call in instead of using the headset? Go to the right where it's the little down arrow says audio options, next to the right of the mute button. And it should say switch audio, and see if you can have it call you and use it through the phone instead of the computer. Steve, can you do a sound check? Are you going to say? I can't hear you. You're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, hello? And I just passed hello? Okay, yeah. I passed the presenter ball to you, so if you want to share.
Okay, let me go ahead and get the slides started.
See if we can get Shiloh connected here with her audio.
Okay.
We can't hear you yet. Call right. When you call. If it calls you, you got to push 1, Shiloh.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you guys can hear me okay right now?
Yeah, I'll give you guys a little. I'll introduce both y'all as soon as we can get. I want to make sure Shiloh's sound is working. We're waiting on her audio to connect. I'm trying to do it through the phone. So if you have it call you, it will, and put in your phone number and then push number 1 when you answer it. or I'll put in the chat. Phone number. Thanks everybody for having patience with us as we get.
Are you able to hear me,
Jamie?
Jamie? Jamie,
Yes.
are you able to hear? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys. All right. I think we're rocking. Okay, so let me introduce these two now that we've got audio and video working here. Thanks everybody for your patience here. We have Shiloh Johnson. She's GIS analyst from Maricopa County. Has a bachelor's degree. Oops, I just lost my thing. Oh, my video's coming on. Okay, she has a bachelor's degree in geography from BYU and 14 years of GIS experience. Her background includes data analysis and application development in the areas of planning and development and emergency management. She's been extensively involved in Maricopa County's COVID-19 response. And Steve Hossack, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The GIS software architect for Maricopa County. He has a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering from ASU and has over 25 years in GIS in both public and private sectors. His extensive background includes GIS application development, geospatial database design and administration, and enterprise system architecture and systems integration. He's applied GIS to many fields, including transportation, public works, environmental, water resources, public health, and law enforcement. Great backgrounds there, you guys. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to these two to take over. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. If you guys can't see the slides, let me know, but I think I got I got two screens, so I think I got the correct screen showing. So anyway, okay, great. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Hossack, and with me is Shiloh Johnson, and we're from Maricopa County, Office of Enterprise Technology. And today I'm going to talk about some of the work that we're doing for the Unified Command Center. Just a little bit of background here, just to let you know what the Unified Command Center is. It's a new department, and it's not really decided yet whether it's going to be permanent or not, but it's a new department formed back in March of this year, kind of right when COVID started really hitting us hard. And so it's a joint effort by emergency management and public health. So hence, we have a public health emergency. Why don't these two get together and join forces and form a department? And then it kind of makes things easier for logistics as well. So there's many logistical benefits of creating the Unified Command Center, or UCC. The primary reason, kind of the first task that needed to be done, was the gathering and distribution of PPE equipment, personal protective equipment, to various healthcare facilities throughout the county. And so the Unified Command Center kind of took the charge of that, but also coordinates a lot of efforts with other departments within the county and external agencies like the state and the federal government. So where me and Shiloh fit into this is we work for OET GIS, and we provide direct GIS support for the UCC. So some of the work that we do for UCC is build applications, databases, maps, do analysis, but this is kind of our biggest, our primary used application. It's called the Situational Awareness Suite. We actually built this a couple years back, but so basically it's kind of like one website. It's like a one-stop shop composed of different applications from various sources, both internal and external. By the way, this app itself is not exposed to the outside world. It's internal only. So it's hosted on our enterprise AGOL, account, and it's heavily used by UCC staff, provides update information about COVID-19, such as cases, testing locations, PPE distribution. It also displays real-time information about wildfires, road closures, traffic, and weather-related incidents such as floods. And so I'm going to have Shiloh go on to the next. She'll talk for the next slide that kind of discusses the COVID portion of this situational awareness suite.
So during our this COVID incident, we have used GIS in a wide variety of ways. A lot of them were expected, but we've had a lot of ways we've used GIS in unexpected ways and a lot of very unique ways. We've done everything from analyzing where bus drivers can stop for comfort stops when all of the businesses were closed, to fatality management. That was a very unexpected situation. We were able to help the Office of a Medical Examiner when their capacity exceeded their, when they exceeded their capacity. That was a very unique way to use GIS. We helped them to monitor their temporary morgue site. We also are using it to identify hotspots of COVID as it spreads. And then we're obviously helping out the schools as well. We're communicating our results from our COVID analysis to the schools so that they can make decisions regarding opening and closing should they need to do that. We also, like Steve showed you on our situational awareness suite, we visualize hospital data so that we can keep track of where the needs are. And we also, a big use of GIS has been the distribution of personal protection equipment, or PPE. We use it to track our volunteers who are distributing PPE, and we also use GIS to keep track of where that PPE is going, whether it's being picked up for volunteers or being picked up, delivered by volunteers or picked up by the entities. We are keeping track of everywhere that our PPE goes. And then we're also using it to monitor vulnerable populations like lower income areas and the homeless population. And we are also using GIS for testing sites and vaccination locations and predictive analysis and a lot of things. We're using a lot of different GIS products, a lot of different GIS skills to do a lot of GIS things. So we're going to go over a few of these in depth with you now. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Steve? Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the workforce application. One of the first very big tasks that we came across was distribution of PPE. As I'm sure you all know, there was a shortage of PPE back in March and April, and it's still difficult to acquire some PPE, like the gowns and the N95 masks and surgical masks. It's very hard for the places that needed it to get a hold of it. And the state received a shipment of stock from the national stockpile, and we got, as Maricopa County, received some PPE from the stockpile, and we needed to be able to distribute that to the locations that needed it the most. So we received a lot of requests for PPE, and then we built up an entire logistics department inside the UCC. It was made up of some National Guard people, a lot of emergency management people that hadn't done logistics before. So they had to learn a whole new field, and we built this logistics department. And then our GIS department helped them build a database to track all of that PPE that was coming in and all the needs, and then it helps them to determine where that PPE should be going. And then once it goes out, we also use GIS to track where that PPE is going, so we make sure that we aren't sending it all to just one location. Of course, we started out with PPE first going to like the assisted living facilities and long-term care facilities because they needed the most, and then we have expanded, and we also now provide to schools, hospitals should they need it. There's a lot of different places that are receiving PPE from us. So we track all of that. And early on, we realized that the locations that needed the PPE the most were not always able to pick up the PPE because they were very busy taking care of their residents in their long-term care facilities and other patients that were at high risk. So we enlisted some volunteers and some county employees to start delivering the personal protection equipment. And we wanted to be able to track where all of the assignments, the delivery assignments, and we wanted to track where our volunteers were going, how their shipments were going, how their deliveries were going. So we used Workforce. No one in our department had used Workforce up to this point because it's a fairly new product. So Esri helped us to stand this up extremely quickly. And we have been using it since very early on in the incident, and it's worked extremely well. Workforce has helped us to what happens is, do you want to go to the next slide, Steve? I think there's a screenshot of our Workforce app. This is a very sanitized version of our Workforce app. There's more information on it. I had to clean it off since it has a lot of sensitive information. But basically, we have people are assigned as dispatchers or mobile workers, and the dispatchers can go in and make assignments, and then the mobile workers can mark when they accept an assignment, and then they can mark when the delivery has been made or if there's a problem with the delivery, and the dispatcher back at the UCC can see exactly how all of the shipments are going, and they are extremely happy with this. It was a little difficult. We had a few little hiccups setting this up at first, but we were able to do it within a matter of days because we were first told that we need this product next week. Then it was, we need it in a few days, and then it turned into a matter of hours. They just said, we need this right now. And it wasn't actually finished at the time they needed it, but they started using it, and we fixed it as they were using it, and it's been a great product. I actually do not touch this product very much anymore. Maybe once every couple weeks I go and help them add a new dispatcher or train someone on it. But they are basically on their own with this product now. It's very intuitive and has been great for us. There were a couple, I'm going to go over a couple of the hiccups we had though. So if anybody starts using Workforce, just some of the lessons we learned from it. So do you want to go to the next slide, please, where I have the lessons learned from Workforce? One thing we learned that not all layers are displayed. We had one layer in our Workforce map when we first started out that was very complicated. It was from an outside source, and we had to remove it because it caused our maps, the product to not even work on any of our Android phones. So that was our first big hiccup, is when the product first went out, we couldn't use any Android phones. We'd only use iPhones. So that was what we told them. We don't know why yet, but it's not working on Android. But they started using it anyway and just made sure that there was an iPhone in every car that went out. And within a couple of days, we figured out it was a problem with one of the layers, and we removed it, and it's worked fine on Android ever since. But that's one thing to look at if you have problems. The other big thing is that Workforce uses a lot of battery, so they have to charge in between deliveries, you know, when they're in their car. And then we've had problems not being able to assign 2 mobile workers to one assignment. And the biggest problem we've had is that there's a new version of Workforce that has addressed some of these issues, but you have to migrate your project, and the migration process is not very straightforward, and it's not very well documented. So we actually have decided not to do that because it was the migration itself was causing too many problems, and the project is working the way they want it to. So we are leaving that until the migration process is either simplified and documented, or we might just be using the old version of Workforce till the end of the COVID incident. Okay, do you want to move on to the next thing, Steve? Oh, our next project, big project, of course, was schools. We wanted to make sure the schools had the information they needed to decide whether they should be using hybrid, virtual, or in-person learning. So once a week, we download all of the cases, the positive cases, the probable cases, and the negative test results. And we geocode all of it, and then we analyze it, and we report through our website all of the case rates and percent positivity and the COVID-like illness rates for every zip code, city, and school district in Maricopa County. And then we use those numbers to determine whether that school is at a substantial, moderate, or minimal risk. And then we also determine whether they should be at hybrid, in-person, or virtual. And it's a very complicated algorithm that goes behind determining what the level they're at based on those numbers. And the doctors here at Public Health review that with us every week to let us know if any changes need to be made to the logic. So the way we did this is in Arc Pro. We used Jupyter Notebooks. So here's a screenshot of part of it's also sanitized. I had to black out a lot of things, but this is basically a piece of our code that we use for analyzing the data every week. It is a lot of analysis that goes in, and like I said, it can change from week to week. So if you have not used Jupyter Notebooks, I highly recommend giving it a try. It's pretty easy to get started. Just if you're doing the same steps over and over again, you can, as you can see over on the right, you can do your geoprocessing, right-click in your geoprocessing history and choose Copy Python code and copy that piece of code right into your Jupyter Notebook, and it helps you get started in writing that code. I found this a lot simpler than some of the other things like Model Builder, where it's difficult to, it's much easier here to customize and to change things to, find where changes need to be made and make the changes when that's necessary. So if you haven't used Jupyter Notebooks, try it, especially if you're doing the same steps over and over again. If you're doing analysis that has to be repeated often, I recommend just giving it a try. And I think we're going to move on. Oh, this is here is a screenshot. If you haven't seen it, you can just Google Maricopa County School Metrics, and this webpage will come up what it looks like when a school goes to look and see what the recommendation is for their zip code. And do you want to go to the next one, Steve?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about this. So now I'm going to discuss our public emergency information map that we launched over the summer for emergency management and UCC. This is a public-facing platform-independent app, and it displays a map of real-time emergency activations for wildfires, floods, and other incidents. It also allows users to determine if they are within an evacuation area based on their location. The location could come from a GPS of their phone or by entering an address. And so, I mean, if you open this up right now, you'll notice that there's no currently any evacuation areas. But if there were, you would be able to enter a location by an address or by GPS, and you would get messages, one of these three messages. Most of the time, and like right now, if you open it up and enter an address or submit a location, it's going to kind of give you the message here over in the far left over here called evacuation level ready. This just reminds everyone to have an emergency evacuation plan. It also gives you some advice on building an emergency go kit, and then list out sort of the 5 P's that you need to consider in an emergency situation or evacuation. That's people, pet supplies, prescriptions, papers, personal needs, and priceless items. In the situation where you would you fall within a zone where the evacuation level is called set, this basically tells you that you should pretty much stay aware of current information, whether it be the news or public health or or emergency services websites. You should consider at least consider voluntarily relocating to a shelter or with family or friends outside of the affected area. And it basically says, get your emergency kit ready to go. Finally, if you are within an evacuation zone where the evacuation level is go, basically that means it's time to go. You are in imminent danger. There's a life-threatening situation, and you need to evacuate immediately to a shelter or with family or friends outside the affected area. And, if you basically ignore this advice, you may not have emergency service available to you. And then at the bottom there of these notices, it'll tell you where the nearest evacuation areas are. And then on the map itself, it will display, locations of like road closures, barricades, and also evacuation shelters. So that's kind of the evacuation or the public, emergency information app. So I'll go to the next slide where Shiloh kind of summarized kind of the lessons learned.
basically what we've learned in through this incident in emergency management is that sometimes you have to make a decision between fast versus perfect, particularly when you're working during an emergency. There are some times, like with our workforce app, when things just have to go out, whether they're ready or not, because they have to be done fast. Like I said, we just told them, you know, it's not working on Android, and here are the other issues we're having, but we'll work on it. And they just started using the application, and we went from there. And then later made it perfect up to their standards. Sometimes it does have to be perfect. Like if we're putting out an evacuation area, we double and triple check to make sure that it's exactly the area that needs to be evacuated, even though it's done quickly. The emphasis is on perfect. So we make sure that area is right before we send it out. And that's usually only about 15, 20 minutes we have to make sure it's perfect, but it does have to be perfect. The other thing that we learned in 2020 is we have to be prepared for multiple incidents. This was the first time in MCDEM history we had multiple incidents. And at the beginning, in March and April, we had 3 incidents going at one time. We had riots, wildfires, and COVID, all that we were managing all at once. And MCDEM's a very small team, so we had to split the team up, some at the UCC, some at the EOC, and the EOC team handled 2 emergencies at once. Before this incident, I was the main GIS person for MCDEM. I still am the main GIS analyst for MCDEM. I handle all of their data and applications, but I always had 2 people trained to back me up should I not be available when an emergency occurs. Now we have many people trained to back me up, and we've utilized many people to back me up. And, you know, when I was in the EOC, someone else had to be in the UCC. So we have several people in our department who can take over for me, which is really great. We also, another important, if you're working in emergency management, another important thing is to have a plan for handling sensitive data. Obviously, with COVID-19, we are handling the locations of where these cases are. That's very sensitive. So we have a secure server. Only a few people can see it. We have an internal map application that shows exactly where these cases are that the doctors can review and look at hotspots. And only a few people can log into that. But we have a very clear and very secure system set up for sensitive data. And thankfully, we already had that set up. So that's very important. And then I think the most important lesson we learned is that you have to have a physical GIS presence in the EOC or the UCC. A lot of the problems we've solved were because there was someone there who was listening and said, I can help you solve that problem. Especially during a fast moving emergency like a wildfire, you have to have someone who is in the room, because when they need help with GIS, they're not going to have time to spin you up and give you the context. You already have to know what's going on and be able to solve the problem. So it's very important that someone is physically present there. I think that's all we were going to cover today. If you have any questions, I know we are going a little bit over, but I'd be happy to answer them. Or I think our emails are on the next slide, and where you can reach either myself or you can reach Steve to ask us any questions you have about emergency management or about COVID or how we're handling things.
Okay, I did not see any questions pop up in there, except about the presentations being made available. So, and you can share this one because you blacked out the sensitive info, right? Obviously. Yes. Yes, we blacked things out. We recorded it. Okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much, you guys, and thanks to all of our presenters for in this track. Really appreciate it. This has been a really interesting thing. I've seen Shiloh give this presentation before, or something similar, and it's been a really great work. Yeah, great to see. So thanks everybody, and we're going to bounce off. Their hospitality thing is open from anytime between 4:30 and 6 if you want to pop over there. I think they're making old fashions today, so somebody is going to show how to create your own old fashioned. So do that if you want, and maybe we'll see you over there and see you guys tomorrow. Kick it off for at 1 o'clock, I believe, if you're not doing a hands-on workshop. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shiloh and Steve, Mohamed and Aparna. Thank you all.